Just a little warning that this week's episode contains some gruesome references, so may not be suitable for any of our younger chief detectives.
Hello and welcome to Bust or Trust, a kids' mystery podcast. I'm Tiernan.
And I'm Athena. Bust or Trust is the podcast where we unravel the world's greatest mysteries with help from you, our chief detectives.
We present all the best evidence and then ask you to decide. Which team are you on?
Are you a mythbuster like me?
Or are you a myth truster like me? We look into all sorts of strange stories from around the world. No mystery is too big for us. Like, if you drop soap on the floor, does the soap become dirty or does the floor become clean?
I think it depends on how dirty the floor was in the first place. If it was in our Bust or Trust HQ bathroom, then the soap definitely gets dirty.
Yeah, definitely. Poor soap. Anyway, we tell you at the end of the show just how to get in touch, so you can let us know if you're on Team Buster or the best one, Team Truster.
So, chief detectives, get ready to take notes and start putting together your case, while we have a quick word with the grown-ups.
The case.
Oh, Tiernan, what is that smell? Is that garlic? It's making my eyes water.
We have to protect ourselves against vampires, Athena. Quick, put these 12 scarves on like I have. It's very warm, but it'll work.
What are you talking about?
Vampires. You know, this week's case. I've made Bust or Trust HQ safe from those pointy-toothed ghouls by rubbing garlic on all of the walls. It's said that they really hate garlic.
Well, I like garlic, but not that much. It smells like everyone in the world with bad breath just breathed out all at once. And vampires don't exist, Tiernan. I'm not putting on those scarves, and you don't need to use up all those garlic cloves.
6,781 cloves exactly, Athena. And whether vampires exist or not is up to our chief detectives to decide. And if they do, there is now no way they're coming to visit us.
I don't think anyone will visit us either for a very long time. What do we know about vampires then, Tiernan, apart from the fact they clearly don't like garlic? Oh, wow. That must really ruin going out for a meal.
Well, Athena, the thing is, if vampires go out for a meal, it means they're flying about trying to drink blood by sinking their fanged teeth into their victims' necks. That's right, a vampire is a creature that feeds on the life essence of the living, or as you might call it, blood. Today, many people think of vampires as thin, pale, undead creatures who are usually very well dressed. But originally, vampires were said to be bloated and ugly, hiding under a cloak before pouncing on their victims. In some stories, they're able to change shape too. Most commonly, it's from a humanoid creature into a bat, but vampires have also been known to turn into wolves and other fanged animals.
The stories say vampires can live for hundreds of years, have no reflection in the mirror, and sleep during the day inside a coffin, usually within an old haunted castle or graveyard. Apparently, the main ways to defeat a vampire are by putting a wooden stake through its heart, using silver or holy water to ward them away, or by exposing them to sunlight, which destroys them, as they are creatures of the night.
Even though they're said to be mythical and just the stuff of stories, there have been vampire sightings for many years all over the world. And at one point in the 18th century, there was said to be an outbreak of vampire attacks in Germany.
But all of these cases could just have been the result of the popularity of vampire stories. Several books in the 18th century, including Bram Stoker's Dracula, were read by many people and have led to vampires being one of the most well-known and well-loved scary creatures. There are now hundreds of books, films, and computer games about vampires, and they are, and probably always will be, a firm favourite in the horror genre.
Thanks for that, Athena. Now, chief detectives, you've got to figure out if vampires exist or not. And just another reminder that this episode is a little scary and gory, so not for our young chief detectives.
Oh, this is easily a Team Buster win. Come on, Tiernan, what have you got, apart from a very strong garlic smell and some scarves?
Actually, Athena, I think this one will be neck and neck. Let's vamp this case up and get to the first piece of evidence.
First piece of evidence.
The first piece of evidence is that every culture has a myth or story about vampires dating back many, many years.
Tiernan, this comes up a lot, and you know what I always say.
I know, Athena, stories travel and it doesn't mean they're real. But I think there's so many tales about vampires that they must have come from somewhere. Let's start at some of the earliest known mentions of the blood-sucking creatures. The ancient Babylonians and the Assyrians, who lived across the Middle East 3,000 to 4,000 years ago, had tales about Lilitu, who later on in Hebrew mythology became known as Lilith. The Hebrew tales suggest that she was Adam's first wife in the story of Adam and Eve, the first two people on Earth. But she was banished from the Garden of Eden because Lilith was not a human, but a demon. There's not as much information about the Babylonian or Assyrian stories about Lilitu, apart from a brief mention in the epic tale of Gilgamesh. But in all versions, she's seen as a type of night monster, only coming out when it's dark, and, sorry chief detectives, this is a bit gory, so you might want to close your ears, stealing babies in order to drink their blood. According to excavated pottery shards, the ancient Persians, from the country we now know as Iran, also believed in demons who sucked the blood from men. And in ancient Greek and Roman mythology, they had three types of vampires. Empusa was a goddess's daughter and was said to feast on the blood of her victims. The Lamia were demons who drank children's blood while they slept, and the Strigas were a type of vampiric bird. In ancient Turkish tales, the Uber were a shape-shifting blood-sucking creature, and in Albanian folklore, they have the Dampir, which similarly can change shape to confuse its victims. Later, in both Slavic and Chinese culture, it was thought that any corpse that was jumped over by a dog or a cat would reawaken as a vampire. In fact, there are stories of creatures with vampire-like traits from every continent in the world.
Who's taking their dogs for a walk by a cemetery? Go to the park! Much easier and less chance of accidentally meeting a vampire. But all those stories are myths, and in fact, the creatures in them aren't vampires, but demons who drink blood. Demons, monsters, or evil creatures are part of so many tales, and of course, drinking blood is a scary and horrible thing to do. So it makes sense it was something attributed to evil creatures. They would often be added to stories to help make sense of the unknown and to create something that could be blamed for what was seen as strange human nature, as many conditions and behaviours weren't understood then like they might be today. As you can see from the Lilith tale, that story started in one place and led to different versions and variations of the same monster, as has happened all over the world with the same idea of vampiric creatures. They often have exactly the same themes of good versus evil.
You're right, Athena, those are myths as far as we know. But much later on in the 16th century, a rabbi wrote about an uncharitable old woman whose body lay unguarded and unburied for 3 days after she died. She rose up as a vampire and killed hundreds of people before she was stopped. Then, in 1672, there's a report from Istria in the country we now know as Croatia, that a man called Jura Grando became a vampire after he died, drinking the blood of the men who upset his widowed wife. He was caught and, gory story alert, a stake was driven through his heart before they beheaded him to ensure he didn't rise up again. That's the first real person who was believed to be a vampire, and from then on, even more stories across Europe appeared, and the term vampire became very well known.
Back then, people didn't understand a lot about how things worked, so just like they used stories and myths to explain the world, whenever someone acted strangely or something weird happened, they often blamed it on magic or the supernatural, instead of looking for real reasons. It was easier for people to believe a vampire or a scary creature was causing someone to act strangely. The real cause was very likely to be an illness or disease that hadn't been discovered or diagnosed yet.
But there are similarities in all of these tales. Descriptions of the vampires say they often look bloated and purplish in colour. Evidence of them drinking blood is seen round their mouth and nose, and while they didn't have fangs, they would have long nails. The stories tell us that garlic is a common method of warding vampires away, and a stake through the heart is seen as nearly always the best way to defeat them, along with the chopping off of their heads or throwing holy water at them. Isn't it curious that these same descriptions and methods cut through thousands of years of tales, almost as a warning to anyone who may come across a vampire in the future?
You say there are similarities, but those vampires don't sound like the vampires we think of today at all. And each country and belief had variations on ways to defeat them or ward them away. That's because the tales evolved over time to reflect the beliefs and styles of that era. For example, the very famous book Dracula by Bram Stoker, all about a vampire count from Transylvania, was inspired by stories about the Romanian prince Vlad III, or Vlad the Impaler, who was known for plundering and killing anyone in his path. A way to understand the horrible violence he committed was through stories about him being a demon or a vampire. The stories told about Vlad III gave Bram Stoker the idea to create the character of Dracula. Experts say another one of the reasons vampires may have been created was partly because of people fearing dead bodies and not understanding how they decompose. When a body breaks down after death, it can look strange, which might have made people think something spooky, like a vampire, was involved. Believing in vampires was a way to make sure people buried dead bodies properly. This helped keep dead bodies out of homes or off the streets, which would have been dirty and, during times of disease, very dangerous for everyone's health.
That is sensible, Athena, but I can't see how vampires could just be advice disguised as a tale when you get your teeth into the second piece of evidence.
Second piece of evidence.
The second piece of evidence is the 18th century vampire controversy. These were a series of vampire attacks all across Germany, starting in 1721 in East Prussia and then the Habsburg monarchy from 1725 to 1734. There were two cases in particular that were the most infamous. That means when something is well known for being awful. The first of these was the corpse of Petar Blagojevich from Serbia. He was reported to have died at the age of 62, but supposedly returned home after his death to ask his son for food. When his son refused, he was found dead the next day. Over the next few days, Blagojevich came back and attacked his neighbours, who all died soon after from blood loss. The second case was Milos Sekar, who was an ex-soldier turned farmer. It was rumoured that many years before, Sekar had been attacked by a vampire, but survived, although no one is sure how. One day, Sekar died while out in his fields tending to hay. And after this, many people in the surrounding area suddenly died in mysterious circumstances, and it was said that Sekar had returned as a vampire to kill them all. After these two incidents, there were many more vampire attacks reported in villages and towns, with locals digging up bodies from cemeteries and putting a stake through their heart to stop them coming back. Government officials were sent out to examine bodies and write reports, which were published all over Europe. More and more cases emerged, and the vampire controversy continued for many years. In 1751, a French scholar called Dom Augustin Carme wrote an essay called The Treatise on the Apparition of Spirits and on Vampires or Revenants. A revenant is someone who's supposedly come back from the dead. He seemed particularly interested in Hungarian vampires, writing, "The vampires, which form the principal objects of this dissertation, are men who have been dead a considerable time, who leave their tombs and come and disturb the living, sucking their blood, appearing to them, making a racket at their doors and in their houses, and lastly, often causing their death. The only way to be delivered from their haunting is to disinter them, cut off their head, impale them, burn them, or pierce their heart." The book was extremely popular because of the vampire controversy, and even the famous French writer and philosopher Voltaire said it proved the existence of vampires.
This all sounds like moral panic, which is when a lot of people suddenly believe false information and fear that something or someone is going to threaten their lives and society. Scholars think the more modern image of vampires that we know today was created to help people understand certain diseases. This might explain why vampire stories are different around the world. People made up stories based on the illnesses that were happening in their countries at the time. This vampire controversy across Prussia was very likely caused by an outbreak of rabies, which was caught from wild animals. Rabies can harm the nerves in your body, which can make people behave in unusual or strange ways. Rabies is spread through a bite, and once someone has it, it can make their eyes red and cause foaming at the mouth. If people were told stories about vampires, these signs might make them think someone with rabies was a vampire. There is another illness called porphyria, or the vampire disease, which is an inherited blood disorder. That means it's passed down through families. Porphyria was a disease mostly found in royal and noble families in Europe. It causes the body to make less heme, a part of red blood cells that helps carry oxygen. Because of this, people with porphyria became very sensitive to sunlight, had strange skin colouring, and their gums would shrink, making their teeth look like fangs. They also couldn't eat garlic. Back then, doctors sometimes told them to drink animal blood to help with their red blood cells. These symptoms sound a lot like what we think of as vampires today. Since it affected royals and nobles, it might also explain why many vampire stories say they lived in castles. Porphyria can't be cured, but today there are treatments. The 18th century vampire controversy ended when the Austrian empress at the time had her own physician investigate the vampire claims. They found absolutely no proof to show that vampires existed. So, the empress banned people from reopening graves, and this law spread across all the countries in Europe. After that, vampires were only found in stories. So, I don't believe it was a real outbreak of vampires at all.
OK, but when you chew on the third piece of evidence, you'll see vampires weren't only found in stories. Far from it.
Third piece of evidence.
Between 1914 to 2014, there were 206 vampire sightings reported in Great Britain. That's more than 2 a year. Paranormal investigator Reverend Lionel Fanthorpe found over 11,000 cases of unexplained phenomena in this country. Most of them were about ghosts, but over 200 were sightings of blood-sucking vampires, including these ones. In January 2005, residents in 3 areas in Birmingham were attacked by a man who bit them. When people tried to fight him off, they say he had incredible strength, fighting back and making his escape. In 1938 in Surrey, a woman claimed that on 3 separate occasions over 3 months, she was bitten by a flying vampire at the same location. Many people thought it might be an escaped animal from the zoo, but the mystery was never solved.
But
yes, I'm not sure why she kept going back to that spot either. And from the 1600s, there is the story of the vampire in Croglin, a small village in Cumbria, northwest England. It had a brown, shriveled face and long, bony hands, and is said to have attacked young girls after the English Civil War. The story says that a girl known as Miss Cranwell was forced to the ground and bitten on the neck by a creepy figure. Her 2 brothers chased it, firing their pistols, but it moved too quickly. They dismissed it as someone who must have been unwell, but then the creature returned and attacked again. One brother managed to shoot it in the leg as it escaped. The villagers went together to the local graveyard where they found a vault with all the coffins smashed except one. Inside was a mummified, shriveled corpse with a leg badly damaged by a pistol ball. Spooky.
OK, firstly, these might be great spooky stories, but where is the evidence that any of these things actually happened? It doesn't seem strange that a paranormal investigator who was looking for paranormal stories found some. He was researching those stories for a new TV show about vampires, so it would have been pretty bad if he hadn't found any. But even Reverend Lionel Fanthorpe said he thought many of the cases may just have been the popularity of stories like Bram Stoker's Dracula, leading people to blame things they couldn't explain on vampires instead. But how's this for a real Team Buster win? In 2009, 2 physicists, that's scientists who study the interaction of energies and matter, published an academic paper proving that vampires couldn't exist as their food source would eventually run out. We are their food source, by the way. The scientists said that if the first vampire appeared on, say, January the 1st, 1600, then the whole human race would have been wiped out by June the 1st, 1602. And guess what? We are still here, Tiernan, and the human population is growing year on year.
Yeah, but a top mathematician pointed out that those results are based on the idea that humans wouldn't try to defend themselves against vampires. I'm not sure any humans I know would be okay with handing themselves over for lunch. And, like how I've covered all our walls in garlic, I think we'd stand up to a vampire attack all okay.
But the study makes a good point. If vampires did exist, why aren't we seeing them all the time? Why are people happy to go out at night time all around the world?
I think vampires have adapted to modern times and just found smarter ways to survive than, flying around at night biting people.
Next, please. Next, please.
You talking to me? I wasn't queuing for your stall. I'm just waiting for someone.
I was talking to you. I'm asking for necks, and you seem to have one. Have you got a spare minute for me to talk to you about the plight of the vampire?
Oh, I'm kind of in a rush to actually...
Great! You are too kind. Thank you. Did you know the vampire population on Earth is at an all-time low?
I didn't even know there were vampires.
See? Once we were revered and feared, yet now there's only a handful of us left in the wild. We're on the verge of extinction.
Oh, is that good?
Not for us, it isn't. We're part of the ecosystem. Without vampires, who picks off the humans that are silly enough to walk along very dark alleys or enter creepy castles?
Yeah, I've never understood why anyone would do that.
Exactly. Survival of the fittest means that vampires need to be around to help humans be less stupid and start being afraid of spooky places again.
Right, I think I get you, so...
What can you do? Great question, thanks for your time. We need humans to help. Think of all the poor vampire children who have nothing to eat.
Vampire children.
Hello,
Oh, where did you come from?
I'm actually 700 years old. Bye!
Adorable, right? Countess Lawinge needs your help, as do the elderly vampires, like the great Count Dabija, who hasn't had a good feed in years, and he can't stop coughing.
Right, okay.
It's a joke! Coffin, get it? No, but seriously, he's not left his tomb since 1832, and the guy needs a wash. That air is so stale.
Look, I really want to help, but I must go.
All I need is a signature and to ask you to sign up to our ethical blood bank donation system. Every week, we'll send around one of our friendly team. Greetings. Like Florian here, and he will collect a small sample of your blood directly from your neck. Just 3 teaspoons could sustain one vampire for up to a month.
Yeah, thanks, but I quite like my blood, I think. I have to go. Good luck.
Bah, humans, the most selfish creatures on the planet. Follow her, Florian, and make sure you nibble on her large toe when she goes to sleep. On it, boss.
Why are you following me? Get away from me. Get away from me.
Next, please! Next, please!
I'm not sure that's what donating blood is all about. You're meant to do it in case hospitals need it for patients, not for sad vampires.
I bet vampires think a blood bank is somewhere where they can open an account and use a card to withdraw every time they need a snack. Ugh, so draining, literally.
You know who's never draining? That's right, our chief detectives. And now it's up to you to decide. Do vampires really exist or not?
It's time to recap the evidence.
Evidence recap.
The first piece of evidence is all the many, many vampire myths dating all the way back to ancient Babylonian, Assyrian and Hebrew stories, and similar tales all around the world for years after. They all describe a similar blood-sucking dangerous creature. There are also reports from the Middle Ages of people who are said to have come back from the dead and attacked others.
But the creatures in the myths started out as demons in stories that have used them as a way to explain odd or dangerous behaviour that people might not have understood. Bram Stoker's Dracula was all about the violence caused by a Romanian prince called Vlad the Impaler as a way of explaining what he did. And vampires may also have been created to teach people to bury dead bodies properly to stop disease spreading.
The second piece of evidence is the 18th century vampire controversy, when across Germany many cases of vampire outbreaks were recorded, leading to a French writer's treatise explaining why it proves that vampires exist.
But the vampire controversy was very likely a moral panic, and it ended when the Austrian Empress's own physician investigated and couldn't find any evidence of vampires. It could have been that there was an outbreak of rabies or people suffering from porphyria, and the symptoms that they had made people believe they were vampires.
The final piece of evidence is that between 1914 to 2014, there were over 200 reported cases of vampires in Great Britain alone, including a man in Birmingham in 2005 who bit people and had super strength.
But those cases were found by a paranormal investigator looking for spooky stories for a TV show. There is no evidence that any of them were actually vampires. In fact, 2 physicists said that vampires couldn't exist as they'd wipe out the human race so quickly they'd run out of food.
So now we're handing it over to you, Chief Detectives.
What do you think? Are you a vampire mythbuster?
Or a vampire myth truster? Get in touch and let us know your thoughts. And most importantly, which side you're on. Come on, Team Truster, we're taking a bite out of this case.
I think you'll be biting the dust on this one. Team Buster all the way. Send us your voice notes with an explanation of why you're a myth truster or myth buster when it comes to whether vampires really are a pain in the neck or they're all just stories and myths.
All you have to do is ask your grown-ups to help you email us your voice notes or thoughts to hello@bustortrust.com.
Tell us your name, age, what you think all the evidence means, and please make sure your grown-ups give us permission to use your voice notes or emails in our next episode.
You can also send us a question on Spotify Q&A, but please get permission from your parents and don't include any personal details so that we can publish them safely. We won't always be able to use all of them.
But we do love to hear them, and here are some thoughts from you lot, our chief detectives, on the last few episodes.
Hello, my name is Caitlin and I'm 12. I am a buster for the Mongolian deathworm because it could definitely just be a plant or a snake. I'm usually a truster though, as there's no way to prove that something doesn't exist, only that it does.
Caitlin, you're normally a truster, but you're not on the Mongolian deathworm. And that is fair, I like that you've examined all the evidence and really thought about it, but well done for normally being a truster, thanks.
And that's great detective work, because that's a really good argument. There's no way to prove that something definitely does exist, only something does. I'm going to stop thinking, otherwise I might cross over. And I don't want to do that.
Join us. Join us.
Thanks to all of you. What a fantastic team we make.
And if you enjoyed the show, please follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify or Amazon Music, or wherever you listen to your podcasts for more great episodes.
We love to hear what you think. So please do rate and review us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. It helps more detectives find, bust or trust. And of course, we'll read out some of your comments on the show.
Plus, if you pay to subscribe to Bust or Trust on Apple Podcasts or our patreon.com/Bust or Trust page, then you get to hear all our bonus episodes, get our weekly newsletter, monthly colouring sheets, and we'll also give you a shout out on the show too.
Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time for more Bust or Trust. This garlic smell is too much. You could have just opened the curtains. Vampires, if they exist, are meant to turn to dust if they see sunlight.
Oh yeah, that would have been much easier. I'll do that.
No, wait!
Too late, the sun is beaming in. Take that, vampires.
Oh no, now all that garlic is heating up, which, actually, it smells quite nice.
Garlic bread for tea?
Oh, yes, please.